All right, everyone, we had a hilarious tale yesterday, which is a Yale psychiatrist who's like, there are warning signs that Trump's totally lost it. We should probably examine him by force if necessary, like literally proclaim, oh yeah, we're going to go kidnap the president. Yeah, that's going to go over so well with the Secret Service. But can I point something out? This is just more reason to not really trust psychotherapists. Particularly, you've got this weird situation where you've got people that are trying to make psychiatry apart as an issue. Look, psychiatry, number one, is a subjective science, so-called. It's sort of a quack science in the most literal sense. It doesn't apply cross-culturally by the standards developed by any particular system of psychotherapy. You can go and study it for yourself. There's going to be a big difference between the sort of dream symbolism or whatever that one psychotherapist indulges in one culture and what would actually be valid for another culture. This would be something that Freud certainly made that mistake. All of them, basically. You've got these archetypes and symbols and sort of things that honestly, explained in a slightly different manner, they would honestly be occultism. They'd probably be more accurate. It's almost like a form of fortune telling in some ways. There's a bit of overlap there, which is hysterical to me. People often don't realize that. It's really funny that they have psychiatrists in schools. They shouldn't, because they're, like I said, they're literally quacks. Get a therapist, somebody just to talk to about your problems. That's fine. Therapy, that works for people. But actual psychotherapy in the psychiatric senses is bunk. It's literally bullshit. And then the second part is that they're not even really hiding that fact. Because they're saying, oh yeah, well, Trump is crazy. You haven't even examined him. You've never spoken to Trump. You've never even shaken his hand, so you wouldn't be able to tell that. There are people that look from the outside looking in, they think he's unhinged. What I am telling you, what I am saying, is that Trump is a Shakespearean master, and he's good at branding. He's still the WrestleMania president. This is his projection. It's an illusion that he casts upon people to keep them distracted. Bush used to do this. Bush was never dumb. People thought he was demented too, but he was actually just really good at projecting. Now, I would say so far Trump hasn't used it towards the malevolent sort of things that Bush did. Bush tried to use it to get out of being called a genocidal freak of nature. Trump uses it primarily because he knows that he's not going to get a fair shake by the media, so why not just have fun with them? Keep them chasing ghosts for his own amusement partially. I have no doubt whatsoever that that's why he's doing it, and it'll keep him in office. He's just weaving layer after layer of illusion for them to pick apart, but there's nothing substantive there for them to actually impeach him on. He knows the impeachment process, the process of removing a president, requires something a little bit more tangible, a little bit more in the sense of legalese, something that you can actually quantify, and not just, hey, I suspect that this person might be unhinged. Well, what evidence do you have? What's the actual cause and effect scenario whereby their madness, so-called, has caused an effect that would make it evident? So far, we don't have that. Until you get that, he knows that he's perfectly safe. Mueller's not going to be able to do anything. Congress isn't going to do anything. He probably doesn't have to worry into the second half of at least his first term, because the midterms, the chances of the Republicans losing the House are basically zero. The chances of them losing the Senate, I think, are declining every day as we move closer to tax season. So, yeah, that would be my statement on it. Psychiatry's quackery. It doesn't have any real relevance. If you're saying, for instance, well, this dream you had means you want to fuck your father. This vision you had means that you have mama issues or something. Okay, well, maybe that works for one culture, and even then not necessarily all the time. It certainly doesn't work for other cultures, because the symbolism is totally different. The family dynamic is totally different. The way of life, good and bad, are considered to be different. In one culture, killing somebody might not really be that frowned upon. And in our culture, killing and raping and stuff like that is considered to be like the ultimate evil, or infanticide, something like that. In other cultures, in some cases, it's par for the course. Infanticide is common in certain cultures. They don't really have a moral problem with it. Westerners come in and say, oh yeah, it was fun. I found this newborn baby in a tin can by the side of the road. It was the most heartbreaking thing I ever saw. So I raised him up and now he's my kid and stuff. Okay, well, the Westerner has that sense that that's wrong. The person, in that other culture may not see it as wrong. or not even wrong at all. It might be considered virtuous. So like you look at maybe Chinese culture, because of communism, because of the one-child policy, for a very long time, it would have been considered like a shame to have a daughter. Instead of just killing off or aborting, the female embryo, or, leaving the female baby basically by a dumpster in order to try again to get a male. And so you have this difference between cultures, and yet a psychotherapist, a psychiatrist, would seek to take the same symbolism, the same understanding of right and wrong, what is or is not normal, and apply it cross-culturally. It doesn't work. It absolutely doesn't work. Trying to determine what is or is not normal or acceptable, and to declare somebody ill if they're outside of that, is quackery. It's essentially saying, well, anything outside of the Overton window is automatically a sign of either some sort of illness or evil, as maybe psychiatrists 100 years ago would have termed it, some degeneracy of the character. And you got to understand, psychiatry was wrapped up heavily in eugenics too. Anthropology had this same problem. When we're talking about the cultural trappings of anthropology, we have to look maybe to a period in which it was totally different than it is now. Now it's like, oh, we appreciate all cultures. We're just trying to quantify things. We dig around in the dirt and try to, theorize our way through it. But back then it was, oh, let's positively apply this to society. What we understand, or think we understand anyway, about human history and human nature and genetics and all these other things. And let's try to design a better, positive human race. We're going to improve the lot of humanity. Oddly enough, some of the methodologies being totally acceptable, number one, and actually working, number two. Then you get into the stuff where it's like, oh yeah, we're just going to sterilize 1 million people. That'll be fine. And we won't face any long-term repercussions for this. And psychiatrists were key in making that happen. Declaring people unfit, because of their racial capabilities. And then having them sterilized was key in eugenics. Essentially, you haul someone, oh, this person is degenerated due to race. Oh, there's a node on their head, some craniology, so we've got to sterilize them. They're given over to violent disposition. They drank beer yesterday, so, that's obvious. So they got a mental illness, we're going to put them on the work farm. Psychiatry was involved with that, and it still basically is. You look right now, it's delving back into politics. It's become fashionable now for psychiatrists, it seems, to try to use their position for political reasons. Well, that's sort of what happened 100 years ago. It didn't go over so well at certain points. So I would keep that in mind. Keeping in mind as well, they seek to make the subjective objective. Now, I had my run-ins with psychotherapists as well, because of course I was a hellion when I was in elementary school. I was a problem child. In talking to them, I always got the impression that they were conflating the objective and subjective. And I am talking, yes, at the time I did understand the difference between those two. I'm like, you're trying to tell me what's right and wrong. Who died and made you king to tell me exactly what that is? If what I am particularly doing, okay, maybe it's like I'm being silly or, doing something that most people would find odd. Is it hurting anybody else, though? I even then had that basically proto-libertarian sense of human interaction. And obviously they didn't really believe in such things. Maybe 100 years ago, some of them would have. I also get the sense that psychiatry tends to be very collective in nature. It looks at the human collective, the broad consensus of what they consider normal, and then seeks to treat anybody who chronically and habitually engages in behaviors or beliefs that are outside of it. Like if you look at certain psychiatric tests, one of the criterion on them for certain types of disabilities is, hey, do you believe in aliens? That's not even a joke. It's actually one of the, at least back when I was looking at those papers, it was one of the criteria upon which they could judge you to have some sort of mental illness, specifically a grandiose disorder, I believe, if I remember correctly, or possibly paranoid schizophrenia. Well, of course, there are plenty of people that would generally otherwise fit well within normie culture who believe in UFOs. It's like, what, 40% of the population literally believes in alien life? By the way, it should be 100% because it's self-evident. If you're talking about bacterium anyway. But it's definitely there. And that's quackery, dude. It doesn't make any sense. You look at the questions that they ask, the diagnoses, it's all sorts of convoluted. Sometimes somebody's personality just is out there, and it doesn't mean that they're mentally ill. And keep in mind, there's another big thing here we've got to talk about when we're talking about psychiatry. There's one really big thing. The difference between a rich person acting crazy and a poor person acting crazy is that the rich person will be labeled eccentric. The poor person will be given pills. That's a big difference. It's not a joke either. It's quite literal. If a person has a lot of money and power, if they're doing well, if there is an outward evidence that they are capable of doing well, then they are treated differently than if there is no outward appearance of the same. Because the idea, it's a respecter of persons sort of pseudoscience. They look at the situation of life and they say, well, this person, they can't have a mental illness because they're not being held back. They got millions of dollars. But that person over there with exactly the same criteria to judge them as having a condition is poor, and therefore they're mentally ill. They're being held back. The fact that they're not a millionaire is more evidence we need to pill them up and make them miserable. So how psychotherapy works. I don't, as you can tell, have much respect for the so-called science of psychiatry. Literally, there's a meme that I saw once years ago, and it was something like, psychology is blah, 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 and then the anthropologist comes along and says, psychology is just applied anthropology or something, or applied, and then it's like, oh no, anthropology is just applied sociology. Sociology is just applied biology. Biology is just applied chemistry. Chemistry is just applied physics. Physics is just applied philosophy, and then it goes on and on. I can't remember exactly the order. But yeah, psychology or psychiatry are literally on the bottom rung, and they should be. It's not even a science. If you're looking at something that's more objective, like, hey, chromosomes determine gender, here's how a cell replicates, something that's observable. You can easily falsify it. You can look at it for yourself and see it happening in real time. If you're looking at chemistry, you mix these two things together, a certain thing results. If you're looking at physics, this is how gravity operates in a specific manner. Here's how something else within physics operates, and it can be quantified, it can be replicated endlessly. It will always happen this way. That's science. That's what science is supposed to be about. And you ask a question, how does it work? Can we replicate this? What else can we possibly do? How can we make this machine engineering? How can we make this machine more efficient? Let's drag in some chemistry and do some mixes and see if we can tweak our formula. Something like that. It's science. Something like psychiatry is, sit down and tell me your problems, and I'm going to, in many cases, arbitrarily judge what they mean. There's not even a specific criteria for everything you could possibly tell a psychotherapist, and you're trusting them to poke around in your head. You might as well just go to a mesmerist. It's probably more effective. Oh, doc, I feel bad. I feel depressed all the time. Well, smoke some marijuana, maybe. Disclaimer, I'm only telling you that that's okay if you're in a state where it's legal. Disclaimer. Or a nation where it's illegal. Yeah, try that. Maybe, grab a beer. Get out more. Ship post on the internet. Do what you need to do. Maybe you're repressing something. You don't need some fucking therapist to tell you that fact. It's not necessary. Yeah. So I find it funny that they're trying to diagnose Trump. They've been doing this for a year. They haven't even examined him. His actual doctor, they raked him over the coals for signing a paper saying, yeah, he's perfectly healthy. Oh, but he didn't see him for long enough. Or they talked on the phone beforehand. He must have told him, hey, doc, fudge this. He eats so much junk food. How can he be healthy? It's like, during the campaign, they said, if you ask questions about Hillary Clinton's health, you're an evil, despicable, sexist human being. But now all of a sudden it's Trump eats his steak the wrong way. Trump eats too much McDonald's. He sucks down too much. He probably drinks like 11 Diet Cokes a day, like they were saying. And it's all, he denies it all. It's like he said, she said. You can't prove a negative, so why are they even reporting on it? It doesn't make any sense. Oh, he's probably crazy. He might be showing signs of dementia. You don't know anything about his personal life. Like, he sits in front of the cameras when he's interacting just with his family. He's probably totally normal and calm under such situations, but he's going to come out and act like a blowhard. It's part of who he is. He finds it funny. It's obviously effective. It won him the election. Now we got this idiot coming out with his book saying, oh, Trump didn't even want to win. But bullcrap. That's not what I saw. So in other words, Trump didn't think he would win. I was even more accurate than Trump because he too expected to lose. I don't think so. Yeah. I know better than Trump about himself. No, that's what a psychiatrist apparently believes. I don't believe that. I think he knew full well what he was doing. Come on. We're getting beyond La La Land and Oz and all of these other things. I don't even know what strange fantasy world we're in now, but we've gone several steps from reality at this point. When you're asking psychiatrists who have never even spoken with Trump firsthand to diagnose him with various disorders, and the legacy media takes it seriously, reports on it as though it were scientifically factual, that's really, really out there. You know, they would get in trouble, these people trying to put out diagnoses of people without even talking to them. Isn't that malpractice of some sort, regardless of whether it's the president? They're a professional. It's not the same as, average Joe says, I think Trump is crazy. Okay, well, who cares? These are people with actual, academic standing and a medical practice, and they're coming out and saying, well, based on all the publicly available stuff, he's probably nuts. Isn't that malpractice of a sort? Or at the very least, isn't it dubious? Or is it them just trying to get more people to come to their practice by putting their name out there in the news by throwing a bunch of shit around? And I think that's probably the case. That's about all. Peace out.